I'm Toni Preckwinkle, chair of the Cook County Democratic Party. I want to welcome you to the 80, our podcast about the party, its candidates, and its leaders. We're beginning our podcast by interviewing our elected Democratic committee people to discuss their backgrounds and thoughts about the history and future of our party. I'm pleased to welcome today Eamon Kelly, who is the committee person for Evanston. Welcome, Eamon.
Welcome. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, Eamon, tell us a little bit about yourself and about how you got involved in politics.
Thanks for having me again. I'm really excited to be here, and I was glad to hear that I would get interviewed by you, President Preckwinkle. That was kind of the excitement for me in having this conversation. So I first got involved. The first campaign I worked on was Jan Schakowsky's race for Congress. I was a high school student at Evanston Township High School here in Evanston. And she was a state representative running to represent the 9th Congressional District in a wide open race. Jan just really appealed to me as a progressive advocate and warrior, and she was one already and became more of one, I think, in the U.S. Congress. I phone banked. I stood out in front of the Democratic Party of Evanston, holding signs for Jan, yelling, encouraging people as they went in to the Democratic Party of Evanston. But we always have an endorsement meeting for a race like Congress where we decide as a whole community who we're going to endorse. And so that was the first race that really got me energized in politics. And I think about it often when I myself now preside over endorsement sessions for the Democratic Party of Evanston, my own time standing at the doors. I guess I'm still standing at the doors waving signs for Jan Schakowsky and the Democratic Party of Evanston thing. Stepping back though, I did grow up in a Democratic household. My dad put himself through college working in a steel mill and law school driving a bus for the CTA, and was active in Democratic Party politics locally. All throughout his legal career. So I guess that was a foundation, but the first race I really engaged in was Jan's race. So
that's surely something you can be proud of. My understanding is that Jan, it was a large field. Jan was the only woman and won handily.
She was. It was some notable names. J.B. Pritzker was an opponent of hers. And as is the thing in Evanston, it was as between her, and he was a resident of Evanston at the time. They lived here for a long time. But it was a race between the two of them about who was the most progressive candidate. And they were both very progressive, but Jan won out as I think the kind of dynamic leader Evanston wanted, and she had represented us in the state house and done a great job. And then she was against Howie Carroll, who was a state senator from the north side of Chicago. It was more, and it was her. And a lot of people had handicapped Howie Carroll as a favorite, and then JB obviously had a lot of resources that he invested in the campaign, but ran a progressive. He was as progressive when he was running for Congress as he was when he ran for governor. But he won for governor, and Jan won for Congress. So.
There we go. Now, you've done a lot of work for the Cook County Democratic Party, which I want you to share with folks around our judiciary. And I know that this is something near and dear to you, that is having highly qualified progressive people on the bench. So why don't you share with our viewers and our listeners your role?
Yeah, so I chair the Democratic Party's retention committee, which evaluates judges on whether or not the Democratic Party will support them for retention. So in Cook County, the system, and throughout Illinois, the system is judges are elected. They're elected for a term, and then after a period of time, they have to get retained by the voters. And that had been a rubber stamp for decades. I think we had done a lot of good work, and I had been involved in good work of electing good, qualified, more diverse judges to the bench. But we had continued for some time as a party to just blindly retain all of the judges that ran for re-election. And I think in some ways, what we don't have, we have a judiciary that isn't filled with the most diverse, the most qualified candidates, but for decades was filled through a highly political process. And while we made improvements on the front end, if we're going to have the kind of judiciary we want here that's going to address issues like fair criminal justice system, creating a more fair criminal justice system, we have to hold the judges that are there accountable, and we have to make sure they're doing an excellent job. And so we've started the hard work of evaluating sitting judges, looking to see which ones we're not going to support. And that is involved in the last 2 cycles, us not supporting for retention 3 judges. We've succeeded with respect to 2 of those judges. But I think more important than the judges, just the 2 judges we didn't retain, or the 3rd that was retained despite our efforts, is the way that we've changed the conversation. That just because you're on the bench doesn't mean that you have a lifetime appointment. You have to continue to hold yourself accountable to the communities that we represent here in Cook County.
The work of the Cook County Democratic Party is twofold in your mind. One, to get the most qualified people on the bench through the electoral process. And secondly, to hold the judiciary accountable through the retention process for people who don't meet our standards for judicial fairness or for compassion on the bench. Now, you have taken on, along with Alderman Leslie Hairston, she's the vice chair, our retention committee. Why don't you talk about sort of the meat of that work?
So we started this 4 years ago, and one of the things that was important to me, to Leslie, to you, President Preckman, when we talked about this work, is we wanted to develop a fair process that considered that balances both the very difficult job judges have, and appreciating and understanding that, and that we don't want to create a popularity contest. We don't want to judges are often called to make unpopular decisions. We want to make sure we protect that independence, while at the same time creating the system of accountability that's necessary, that they continue to exhibit the demeanor and the ability to serve on the bench. And what we did is we developed a process that was informed by bar reviews and other outside inputs about judges that were problematic. And then we launched an investigation process where we gathered as a committee, most of us, but not all of us, are lawyers. And we independently investigated every judge that we identified as worthy of investigation in terms of whether or not they should be retained. And then we talked to their presiding judges. We interviewed them. We offered them an opportunity to be interviewed personally. We observed their courtrooms to determine, to observe firsthand their demeanor, both with unrepresented parties and represented parties. And through all that work, we end up forming as a committee, through all that investigation, our recommendations about who should or shouldn't be retained. But it's a very intensive process. It involves looking over their decisions, the appellate records, the files they're in, and making a really informed decision, and then sharing with all of the committee people how we got to our decision and why it is that we weren't recommending the retention of a particular candidate in each of the last 2 cycles. And we built that process because we wanted to have confidence that we were making the right decision. We wanted to build in some protections to make sure that we were making our decision based on the judges that were being evaluated, and that every judge who was evaluated had an opportunity to be heard. And I feel great appreciation for all the members of the committee who dedicated their time. And it's a very intensive period of time that we put in to make those recommendations. And it's critical that we put that work in. And then
once we've made the recommendations, we have to communicate to the public about why we made those recommendations and why it's important that we not retain the particular judges that we've identified.
I think over the last decade or so, the party has been much more conscientious about trying to determine the credentials of people that we slate, to be sure that people are qualified or highly qualified judged by the bar associations. And as you point out, let me be clear, this is at your request that we began to look at this. I wish I could say it was my idea, but it wasn't. At your request that we began to look at the second part of this, not only slating good judges, but as you say, holding those on the bench accountable. Is there any particular part of your legal experience that prompted you to suggest that we look more closely at retention?
It's not so much my legal experience, but my sense of responsibility as a party leader. So we kind of, as a party leader, we kind of created the problem in some ways. We, by rubber stamping people, by having a period of time, not recent history. I mean, I've been really proud of the judges we've supported in recent history, but historically, where we let people get in and serve on the bench, because they of their political connections, irrespective of their qualifications, irrespective of their diversity of the group of people we were putting forward, and without consideration for a varied life experience. There was a period of time when it seemed like everybody that ever made it onto the bench had been a state's attorney, and so you had a whole generation of judges who that was their narrow experience. And we've done a much better job of expanding that, but we continue to kind of blank check support all of the candidates who've been elected before us. And I had a feeling of responsibility that we as a party had a duty to step up and take more seriously our role as the only meaningful check. I mean, the voters are the only meaningful check here in terms of the continued service of judges on the bench. So I was, proud to be a part of launching this with Leslie and others, that we would take seriously this work. I guess the countervailing point is, as a lawyer, I'm also committed to working hard to build a fair process. That is, I wanted to make sure that we had integrity in our decisions, that we communicated the basis for our decisions, that we did the hard work in making our decisions, because just as much as we want to create accountability, we want judges to be confident that if they go out there, they work hard, they do a good job, they're open-minded about their perspective. The fact that they make tough decisions every day is not going to mean that we will oppose them when they run for retention. So we had to do both. We had to be accountable to change, and at the same time send a clear signal that we understand and appreciate that they got to make tough calls, and that we're going to consider that when we do our process.
Well, I want to thank you and all of the members of the retention committee again for your good work. I want to conclude, though, by asking you to talk a little bit about the national government. You've talked at some length about what the party needs to do in terms of supporting good judges and holding accountable those who we believe are not fit for the bench. But let's look at the national level. Evanston has always been a strong Democratic township. And you, of course, have been its leader for how many years now?
So I think I'm getting up to 8 years now.
Oh my goodness,
10.
okay.
Yeah, which is
All right.
41. I appreciate the opportunity to have served in this way.
Okay, help us out. I've tried to ask all of our committee people what they hope to see from the Biden-Harris administration, or if they have any particular substantive areas that they have concerns about.
So I appreciate how they've started. I think one thing that that's critical is we as a Democratic Party have to remember what matters so much to the actual people that make up our party. And we need to be focused on creating more economic opportunity. We need to be focused on making sure that opportunity is equitably distributed across different economic situations and diverse populations.
So I'm happy about where it started, but they have a lot of work to do. They can't back off for a second on progressive immigration reform. I expect them to continue to fight for that. I expect them to take head on the need for continued criminal justice reform. I understand that they're and appreciate their staging on where they're focused on. I thought their first day executive orders were critical, but they can't take their foot off the gas. They have to keep fighting for why it is we got them elected.
Well, listen, surely if we're going to climb out of this depression, we need strong federal support for local government. And as you've pointed out, we've got to focus on economic opportunity for all of our people. And near and dear to my heart, of course, immigration and criminal justice reform as well. So we will keep our fingers crossed and, of course, make our voices heard in regards to what we want to see from the federal government. And I'm thankful for you and the good work that you've done to strengthen our party, and in particular, to strengthen our impact when it comes to the bench and the judiciary. So thank you very much, Eamon Kelly. We're grateful.
Thanks, Dawn. Appreciate it.